doing a lasagna bed, and we're laying down cardboard to smother the grass below. The cardboard will rot and the roots will grow right through it. The fun thing about it is that the cardboard is not that hard for roots that have the help of photosynthesis to grow down through it, but for the tips of young plants, without the help of photosynthesis to give them the power, they can't much push through this cardboard, even though it's quite easy to grow down through. So it's a way to kill the grass quickly and very, very rapidly get some plants in the ground without having to till the soil. And this is kind of a truncated lasagna bed. It's not nearly as high as most lasagna beds. We'll probably aim for about 4 to 6 inches of layers. And the materials we're going to use are going to be composted cow manure, shredded leaves, live oak leaves mostly, and shredded Spanish moss. And that's one that maybe hasn't been done before. From a little bit of research I could find on the internet, it seems like it's high in nitrogen, has a fair amount of trace minerals, but is slow to break down, so that's why we're shredding it. And we're going to hope that it's effective. If we could easily have mown some grass today, we probably would have mixed some grass clippings in to speed up that rotting. We're also going to soak everything with compost tea extract, which should help to get us a high level of microbial activity right away and speed up the rotting. And this is a pretty ideal place to do it because it's Florida and plenty of days are going to be in the 70s. The nights are going to rarely get down to the low 30s. And with that warmth, if we can keep it moist, the materials that we're layering are going to rot real quickly. The tomatoes is what we're thinking this bed will be for, should be able to take off and really grow quickly. Orienting it east-west, which means that they will shade the next bed, but no one bed will shade itself all day long. So you want to put the higher things like tomatoes towards the back and the shorter things towards the front. Front is south, yeah. Put down compost, putting the azomite on top of that. We'll put azomite a little higher up too. And what we next want to do is drench the compost and the cardboard with tea, compost tea extract. The reason for that is we want to be sure that that cardboard is very wet so it starts to break down. And then the reason the compost is the next layer, even though usually you start with the coarsest stuff, is some compost right next to the cardboard will really hold that water there and make sure that stuff starts to break down. Plus, you've got microbes. We'll have microbes on top, microbes on bottom, and they'll be that much more quickly moving through the pile. But it's not a lot of compost. It's less than an inch thick. It's probably about a quarter inch. It looks like if you look at where my finger made that. Maybe about 1/3 of an inch, maybe even a half, but not much more than a ½ inch thick. And a little thicker in some places. It's fine to spread it out. You don't need very much, just enough to hold some water against that cardboard and get the microbe inoculation going on. And the azomite, I'm probably putting it down at maybe, this is probably like a quarter pound to the, the total area of it. And I'll probably end up putting a ½ pound on totally. So I'll be sprinkling it more lightly other places. I like to have more minerals down lower. That's more how it happens in nature. And so the heaviest application will be down low, and then that'll also really be feeding the microbes right down here, especially the fungi and stuff that'll be helping to break down that cardboard. And then we're going to layer up our shredded as well as it is, hopefully well enough. Spanish moss, that's the new innovation here. Leaves have always been used in the lasagna bed. We're going to layer that with compost. If we had grass clippings, we'd be mixing those in. But we don't have grass clippings, so we won't be doing that. But you'll be feeding compost tea. Compost tea is amended with a little bit of fish, and that'll help to add the nitrogen that's needed to drive this. I just saw an interesting blog discussion. Somebody had used 10-10-10, and their pile wasn't rotting. And somebody made the point to them that if you use 10-10-10, you're killing the very microbes you need to rot it. So you can't supply nitrogen with 10-10-10 because it's too high salt. Now, to be fair, if they'd use a very light dusting of the 10-10-10, it probably wouldn't have been a problem. Because it is true, the microbes will use 10-10-10 just like they use the nitrogen in compost and stuff. But they can't handle very much of it. It's way too high salt and it's going to kill them all. This bed is going to be used for tomatoes. We're going to try some heirloom tomatoes in this bed. We'll be doing some other beds later on with some more commercial varieties. They're highly disease resistant. There may be some disease down here I don't know of, but from what I understand of the disease that really bothers us up in North Carolina you shouldn't have to worry about it because your nights should not be, by the time these plants are susceptible to late blight, Phytophthora infestans is a disease I'm talking about, these plants should be into a nighttime temperature zone where it never goes below 50. Not a lot of danger of late blight. I think that, so if we thought there was a danger of late blight, we would rigorously adhere to at least 2 feet between the plants. We're thinking we can get away with being probably 3 or 4 inches under 2 foot per plant. Start about 6 inches in and then go that way. And you should be able to fit 7 plants in there. You'll have to measure it and do the math to see what the spacing in between them is. So we're still trying to stay true to our mission, which is to disturb the soil as little as possible, especially this soil here, because this soil is basically, for a lot of the year, anaerobic. And if it gets oxygen exposed to it, there's going to be a sudden huge bloom of aerobic activity, and tons of carbon is going to be used up and gassed off into the atmosphere by that aerobic activity. We had a quote from our friend, and you can find his video on livingwebfarms.org, Mark Schoenbeck, and that quote was that if you work this soil up, you could lose up to 9,000 pounds of carbon in every acre. And so we've got a strong incentive not to work this soil. So we're using lasagna bed here so we don't work the soil, and then for a larger area, we're going to just sheet compost. We're going to put down cardboard, compost, and leaves. The leaves are to keep the compost from drying out. We'll do that probably about 4 inches thick. 4 inches of the combination of cardboard, compost, and leaves. Probably 2 inches of compost, 2 inches of leaves, and then the cardboard we won't even count, so it'll be slightly more than 4 inches. For immediate production, we may have some plants like squash that want a lot of nutrition, and what we can do there is set the plants out, mulch them heavily right around them, and have you dig a hole for the squash so you've killed the grass right there. And then we will sheet compost those in a really dynamic way. We'll put about 1 inch or so of food waste out before it goes anaerobic so it's not smelly and doesn't bring pests around. We'll cover that with 4 inches of fresh grass clippings, and we'll put 4 inches of dry brown material, hay or leaves, on top of that. And that little pile actually goes thermal, gets a hot phase, and that heat draws the life up to the food. You can come back and look at that food a week later, it'll be gone. And what you'll have is a mini compost pile with all of the food, all the leachate from that process going right to the plants.
Right around the plant.
Right around the plant. I'm always scared to go right against it, so I back off about a ½ inch. But a ½ inch is all you have to back off. I know that works. And I have never seen more vigor and productivity than from plants that were treated that way. And that can quickly ramp very dead soil or not very active soil up into a highly productive area.
Right where you want it.
Right where you want it. It's obviously way too intensive for farmers. This is definitely a gardener's technique. But it's a great way to use your food waste in the warm time of the year. If you do this in the cool time of the year, there won't be enough heat and you'll bring around vectors, also known as rats and mice, raccoons and possums. So this time of year, that 4 inches of dry brown with the 4 inches of green below is a biofilter and nothing smells it. I've had dogs walk right by areas I did this process with where I'd used bakery waste, which included dough, dead bread, scraps of other things that would be highly attractive to dogs, and they didn't touch it. They didn't even know it was there. So what we're doing here is we're soaking the cardboard is what we really want to get soaked. The compost is there to hold the water on, so we really want to soak the cardboard. The truth is, because we were waiting on the water, I spread the compost to save time. I would normally soak the the cardboard first, then put the compost on, then soak it again. But for right now, I could be doing something by putting the compost on, and it's good enough. But you can see we're spreading some of the compost off the cardboard. So he's going to do it a lot because he wants that cardboard to be sopping wet. And that'll take a few minutes, Like really getting the water out there. And then as we put other layers on, we're going to come back and soak them. Moisture is critical. If it's dry, it won't rot. It has to be wet. And of course, we're not just using water, we're using compost tea, and that really raises the likelihood that it'll rot nice and fast. The good news is because we have that compost on there, even if we don't get every bit of cardboard soaked, that compost holds 10 times its weight in water, and eventually that dry cardboard will suck the water out of the compost. Compost is wonderful for lasagna beds, compost piles, because it is a sponge. It'll take water up when it needs to, and give it back out when it's needed someplace else. And here we're doing a mix of leaves and Spanish moss. As I said, Spanish moss is a gamble. We're hoping it'll work because we just want diverse organic material. We didn't have a lot around. We might find some grass clippings for this. I don't know if we will. Grass clippings are really good because they're high nitrogen. These leaves are going to take a little while. We'll put some compost on top. That'll help them. We'll probably do that twice. Put leaves and Spanish moss down and compost 2 times, and then it'll be done. And then the only thing left is to dig out the path and spread the dirt from the path over the top of it. And we'll be able to plant tomatoes in it right away. I would wait for other things. Just keep soaking. Okay. I grow better with compost tea too.
All right.
Okay, so what I'm doing now is capping this with compost. That's going to have several effects. It's going to hold the moisture in to help this to break down, provide the night microbes. There's going to be some nitrogen in the compost that's going to help with the rot. Like I said, I would have liked to have grass clippings. Another thing you can use if you don't have grass clippings is alfalfa meal. It's about $15 for a 50-pound bag at your local feed and seed. Mixing that in. Mixing in a nitrogen source is a good thing. You'll get to play with that here. If you need nitrogen, you can add more fish to your tea or something like that. But you do need nitrogen to break down all of these carbonaceous leaves, you know. And that you're just going to have to watch on that and see.
So you would have put the clippings first?
I would have mixed them into the grass, into the leaves.
Into the leaves.
I wouldn't have ever left them alone because they mat. I would have mixed them in with the high carbon
Okay.
as a nitrogen source. Yeah. That's what I would do.
And then the compost over the leaves.
Compost over the leaves, yeah. That's right.
Okay, I took a spade and I started digging out chunks. And I was separating the grass and the roots out of the chunks in the ditch, and then sprinkling it on the leaves that were on top just to hold the leaves. And I realized that it seemed like a lot more work, so I just scooped out sections and threw them up on top, and then just bent down and started breaking the roots out of the soil and scattering it. And I was really working the roots, you know, to try and get all of the life that's in that soil around the roots on top here, which they would just get baked in the sun anyway, until I realized that I can just put them in a compost pile. So I'm going to come back for them, but I just put some moss over it, and here's all the roots. And that'll be great inoculation for a compost pile. And so I'm going to just continue this ditch all the way around, and there'll be plenty of dirt up on top because this is going to shrink. And then I guess the next bed would go with the another ditch right next to it, and the walkway would be end up double that width, and it'll be a nice raised bed.